Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People's Story. There's something special about traditions that bind a family together. For us, it was our annual summer camping trip to this beautiful spot about 2 hours from home. The area borders private property but sits on public land with a perfect view of the mountains and a creek running nearby. I've been going there since I was 10 when my grandfather first showed it to me. "This is God's country," he'd say, teaching me how to fish in the creek and identify local plants. "We respect the land, and it gives back to us." That lesson stuck with me as I grew up, went to college for environmental science, and eventually started bringing my own family there. My wife and our 2 kids, plus usually my sister and her husband, would pack up for a long weekend every July. We'd set up our tents in the clearing, build a small fire pit inside the designated ring, and spend days hiking, fishing, and disconnecting from the world. We always followed the leave no trace principle, packing out everything we packed in, making sure the site looked untouched when we left. Last year, my grandfather passed away and left me a modest inheritance. Nothing life-changing, but enough that I'd been researching investment opportunities. My buddy from college who'd gone into land development had been giving me advice on potential options. "Real estate is always smart if you know what you're looking for," he told me over beers one night, "especially undeveloped land in areas seeing growth." I nodded along but didn't have anything specific in mind until our camping trip last summer. We'd arrived Friday afternoon, setting up our usual spot. The kids were excited to swim in the creek, my wife was unpacking our cooking gear, and my sister and brother-in-law were pitching their tent. Everything was peaceful until Saturday morning. I was brewing coffee over our small camping stove when I heard the sound of an expensive vehicle pulling up. A massive white SUV with chrome everything came to a stop near our campsite, and out stepped a woman in what had to be $500 worth of outdoor gear that looked like it had never seen dirt. She marched directly toward us, designer sunglasses perched on her head, smartphone already recording in her hand. "Excuse me, this is private property. You need to leave immediately." Her voice carried that particular tone that makes your skin crawl, entitled, angry, and completely convinced of her own righteousness. I stood up slowly. "Good morning. Actually, we're on public land. We've been camping here for years." I kept my voice calm, even friendly. "No, you absolutely are not. I own all this land, and you are trespassing." She gestured wildly around us. "I'm developing this entire area, and you're interfering with my plans. I've already called the authorities." My wife joined me, the kids stopping their play to watch nervously. "We have permits," my wife said. "This is designated public camping land." The woman, who I'd later nickname Karen when telling this story, scoffed. "Those permits are outdated. The county rezoned this area last month. I know because I'm on the planning commission." This struck me as odd because I specifically checked permits before our trip. My grandfather had taught me to always have documentation when camping, so I walked to our car and pulled out the folder with our camping permits, land maps, and GPS coordinates. "Ma'am, here's our documentation. As you can see, this is public land, and our permit is valid through the end of the month." I showed her the official paperwork. She barely glanced at it. "Those are fake. You people always try to squat on valuable land. Do you have any idea who I am? I've developed 3 major communities in this county." "Mom, are we in trouble?" my daughter asked quietly, grabbing her brother's hand. Karen turned to my children. "Yes, you are in trouble because your parents are breaking the law. They're teaching you terrible values." That's when I felt my temperature rise. I could handle her yelling at me, but bringing my kids into it crossed a line. "That's enough," I said firmly. "We're legally camping here. If you want to wait for the authorities, that's fine, but please stop threatening my family. You dirty campers think you own these woods," she snapped. "This is exactly why I'm building exclusive vacation rentals here, to keep people like you out. This will be a high-end retreat by next summer." My brother-in-law, usually the calmest person I know, stepped forward. "You might want to check your property lines before making accusations." "I don't need to check anything. My property starts at the creek and extends all the way to the highway. I'm a real estate developer. I know exactly what I own." We went back and forth for nearly an hour. She called us freeloaders, environmental hippies, and worse. The kids retreated to their tent, upset by the confrontation. Just when I was about to suggest we pack up and file a complaint later, not worth ruining our weekend, a sheriff's department vehicle pulled up. The deputy who stepped out looked tired, like he'd done this dance before. "Morning, folks. What seems to be the problem?" Karen immediately launched into her version, talking over anyone who tried to speak. "These people are camping illegally on my property. I want them removed and cited for trespassing." The deputy listened patiently, then turned to me. "Can I see your permits, sir?" I handed over our documentation. He reviewed it carefully, pulled out his GPS device to confirm our location, and nodded. Ma'am, they're on public land. Their permits are in order. The campsite is a good 100 yards from your property line. Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. That's impossible. I own this entire area. No, ma'am. Your property begins over there. He pointed to a line of trees to the east. The county surveyed this area last spring after some boundary disputes. These folks are well within the public camping zone. This is ridiculous. I'll be calling your supervisor. She stomped back to her SUV, but not before turning to us one last time. This isn't over. Nobody's going to want to camp here when I'm done. I have plans for this whole area. After she drove off, the deputy sighed. Sorry about that, folks. Enjoy your weekend. As he was leaving, he hesitated. Just so you know, the private land adjacent to this area, not where you're camping, but over yonder, it's been for sale for months, belongs to an older gentleman who's moving to be closer to his daughter. Is that the property she thinks she owns? I asked. No, she knows exactly where her land is. She's been trying to buy the adjacent lot, but keeps lowballing the owner. He's refused to sell to her specifically because, well, he gestured in the direction her SUV had disappeared. Not the first complaint we've had. After he left, we tried to salvage our weekend, but Karen's visit had cast a shadow over our peaceful retreat. That night around the campfire, I couldn't stop thinking about what the deputy had said. Back home, I decided to look into this adjacent property, mostly out of curiosity. What I discovered was troubling. Online community forums were filled with complaints about a female developer who was trying to build luxury vacation rentals in the area. Environmental concerns were being ignored, and there were allegations of corners being cut on previous projects. With my background in environmental science, this bothered me deeply. The ecosystem around our camping spot was fragile. Development wasn't inherently bad, but irresponsible development could destroy what made the area special. I found the listing for the property and, on impulse, contacted the agent. The next day, I met the owner, an elderly gentleman who'd lived on the land for over 50 years, but could no longer maintain it. My wife and I built that cabin ourselves, he told me as we walked the property. Raised our kids here, taught them to respect nature. Now developers want to tear it down and put up vacation homes that'll sit empty most of the year. Why not sell to them? I asked. He snorted. That woman who keeps making offers, she's offered half what it's worth, and I've seen what she did to the wetlands on her other property. My land deserves better. Over the next few weeks, we developed a friendship. He showed me the boundaries, the creek where he'd taught his children to fish, just like my grandfather had taught me, and the trees he'd planted decades ago. I talked it over with my wife. The inheritance money was sitting in our account, and this felt right in a way other investments hadn't. It wasn't just about money, it was about preserving something important. It's a big commitment, my wife cautioned. Are you sure? I wasn't. Not completely. But when I ran into Karen at the local hardware store and she cornered me, my decision crystallized. I know you've been talking to the old man about his property, she said, blocking my path between shelves. Stop interfering. I have plans for that land that will benefit the whole community. It's a free country, I replied. He can sell to whoever he wants. Listen, she lowered her voice. I can make things difficult for you. I have connections in this county. Your camping days will be over. I smiled politely. Have a nice day. As I walked away, I made up my mind. The purchase process wasn't simple. There were surveys to conduct, paperwork to file, financing to arrange. But 3 months later, I owned that land. We paid a fair price. Not cheap, but worth every penny. The elderly owner was delighted, especially when I shared my plans for a sustainable family ranch that would preserve most of the natural features. You'll do right by this land, he said as we signed the papers. That's all I wanted. The first thing I did was hire a proper surveyor. That's when we discovered something interesting. Karen had actually placed a storage shed and part of her garden about 15 feet over the property line. It had been there for years, apparently, and the previous owner had never complained. Winter came, and we began planning. I researched sustainable ranching practices and how to build with minimal environmental impact. We'd preserve the creek, the mature trees, and create a family retreat that honored the land rather than exploited it. By the following summer, we were ready for our annual camping trip, but this time on our own property. We set up camp in our usual spot on what was still public land, but spent days exploring our adjacent property and planning where buildings would go. The kids were thrilled with the idea of a family ranch, already claiming spots for their future cabins. It was the third day when we heard the now familiar sound of Karen's SUV approaching. My wife and I exchanged knowing glances but said nothing to the kids or my sister's family. This moment had been months in the making. You again! Karen stormed toward us, phone already recording. I thought I made myself clear last year. This area is going to be developed. Your persistent trespassing is delaying my project. I stood calmly. We're still on public land, just like last year. Not for long, she snapped. I'm in final negotiations to purchase the adjacent property. Once that happens, I'll petition the county to rezone this area. These camping grounds will be gone. That sounds like an ambitious plan, I said. It's happening, whether you tree huggers like it or not. My luxury retreats will transform this backward area. My brother-in-law could barely contain his smile. My sister elbowed him to stay quiet. Actually, I said, reaching into my pocket for the folded deed, I think there's been a misunderstanding about the adjacent property. Karen's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? My family purchased it 3 months ago. We're building a sustainable ranch that will maintain the natural environment. The look on her face was worth every penny we'd spent. Her mouth opened and closed several times without sound. Her phone lowered slowly from its recording position. That's impossible. The owner promised. He promised to sell to someone who would respect the land, I finished for her. By the way, according to our recent survey, your storage shed and garden are encroaching on our property by about 15 feet. We'll need those removed within 30 days. You can't do this, she whispered, then found her voice. I'll fight this. I'll challenge the sale. You're welcome to try, I said, but the deed is registered and the sale is final. We own the property. My daughter tugged at my shirt. Dad, does this mean we can build our cabin now? Karen's face turned that alarming shade of red again. This isn't over. I have lawyers, good lawyers. You have no idea who you're dealing with. As she stormed back to her vehicle, my wife put her arm around my waist. Was that as satisfying as you hoped? Even better, I admitted. Over the next year, Karen tried everything. She filed complaints with the county, claimed the survey was incorrect, and threatened lawsuits that never materialized. Meanwhile, we built our ranch. We constructed a modest main house that blended with the landscape, using sustainable materials and solar power. We created a designated camping area for extended family and close friends. The kids helped plant a vegetable garden, and we restored the cabin the previous owner had built. The community, initially suspicious of any development in the area, came to appreciate our approach. When Karen tried to rally support against our illegal structures, she found little sympathy. Her reputation for bullying and environmental disregard had preceded her. Eventually, her development plans fell through when investors backed out after environmental impact concerns were raised. Last I heard, she'd moved to another county to start fresh. Our ranch became exactly what we'd hoped, a gathering place for family, a connection to nature, and a legacy we could pass down. Every summer, we still camp in our original spot, though now we have the comfort of proper facilities just a short walk away. Sometimes I think about how different things would have been if Karen hadn't confronted us that day. Her attempt to bully us off public land led directly to her losing the property she coveted and us gaining a family homestead. Last weekend, sitting around the campfire with my extended family, including my sister's new baby, I realized something important. Sometimes standing up to bullies isn't about confrontation, but about taking positive action they never anticipated. "Two unexpected blessings," my wife said, raising her mug of camp coffee. "And to Karen," my brother-in-law added with a wink. "May she never change." We all laughed under the stars, secure in the knowledge that this land would remain a refuge for generations to come. The joke was indeed on her, but the real victory wasn't about revenge. It was about preserving something precious and creating something lasting. That said, I still smile every time I pass the spot where her shed used to be, now home to a butterfly garden my daughter planted. Some lessons are worth teaching, and some victories are worth savoring. The next one is a malicious compliances story. To make an already long story as short as possible, some background. I am a manager for a North American railroad, and a lot of our work involves different crafts of employees. Different crafts have different unions and different work rules. The managers of the other crafts and I work together well to get done what we need to get done, especially when some of the work needs to get done at night. The track guys can have a crew assigned to nights, while the signal guys can't. Even better, the signal guys who work overnight have to be let go after 12 hours, and if it's now their regular shift because they came in last night, they get paid the rest of the day to go whole and sleep. Track guys have all 3 shifts, but we only have a day shift and an evening shift, but no night shift because the big hats don't want to hire enough people to do it. Now, the company has decided that paying guys to go home 2 hours early on a Thursday come in and work overtime all night at 10 p.m., and go home at 10 a.m., getting another 4 hours pay to go home and sleep is the ending of all that is good and pure in the universe, and will eventually lead to the collapse of capitalism, the nation, and indeed the universe itself. So they decide that the second shift guys have to stay 4 extra hours, and the first shift guys have to come in 4 hours early. I point out that 1. I can't force employees to work overtime unless it's an emergency, and the union isn't likely to agree that we want to do this at night so we don't affect traffic is an emergency. 2. Not all employees are qualified on the same things. 3. Since they took half of my trucks away 5 years ago, because savings, I don't have enough vehicles for an entire second crew to show up at 2 a.m. and relieve the guys working in the field so they can go home. The guys currently working will have to stop work, pack up the tools, drive back to the office, let the smaller relief crew load up, drive back out to the work site, do the starting paperwork and briefings, and begin the work. And most importantly, 4. That while we aren't there, the track guys can't work because we have to keep taking things off of the rail so the track guys can do their work and then put them back when the guys are done so we can run the trains in the morning. All of it falls on deaf ears because the freckle-faced college kid who opens every conversation with, "I have an MBA, damn it," who has somehow gotten to a position where he's in charge of the estimates, wants to complain about those 24 hours a night. So, after having gone on the meeting record for all of it, I get out of the kid's way. I decide that if my boss isn't going to have my back, I'm not going to stop this inevitable disaster. After all, I've only been doing this for 27 years, but he graduated with a 3.6 GPA from UTEP, so he must know better. So the first night, the job grinds to a halt like clockwork at 1 a.m., the second crew shows up at about 4:15, and they get to work. The track folks pack it in because by the time anything gets dismantled, there won't be enough time to get anything done and put it all back together to start moving trains by 7. Second night, the shift change was a little smoother, so they got out there at 3:45. Managed to get a little work done before packing up. Third and fourth night, it rained really hard, so the drive back to the shop and out to the job site took extra time. No work done after the new crew showed up at 4:30. Bright and early Monday morning, we show up at our morning meeting to find that the track guys got about 30% of the work done that they'd planned for the week, and at this pace would finish a 6-week job more than 15 weeks behind, and over budget by more than 300%. Mr. MBA proceeds to launch into his carefully rehearsed speech about key metrics, percent spent versus percent complete, and all sorts of other nonsense. Then he decides to start in on me, since I obviously conspired and colluded with my employees to egregiously erode progress for an entire week. I held up the meeting minutes from the previous week, told him in no uncertain terms that he had asked, in fact demanded that we have a full shift change in the middle of the track department's work. I looked across the table at him and asked him if he wanted to revise that position. Completely unwilling to let this lowly engineer tell him what to do, he said no, and I was supposed to somehow magically make the shift change faster. Next 3 weeks were the same story. They've now been out there for a month and have managed to accomplish just shy of a week and a half of work. Mr. MBA shows up on the site one night, just in time to watch my night guys walk off, watch the track guys shut down the machines and gather outside to smoke, hang out, and generally carouse because they know they now have 3 hours to screw off and be paid for it. My guys had called me when Mr. MBA showed up, so I get out of bed and get to the job site just in time to see this guy in his shiny, fresh from the package safety gear screaming at the top of his lungs to the guys to get back in their equipment and get the naughty back to work. They all refuse because they all know that they can't work without us there. Not that they care all that much about our equipment, but because they know Mr. MBA has been throwing a little too much weight around and nothing makes union employees stick together better or faster than putting the screws to a manager who really needs it. I walk up during a profanity-laced tirade and cut right in and say, "Well, Mr. MBA, I'm sure you're not suggesting that these qualified employees violate Rule 666, which clearly states that they shall not under any circumstances run that equipment through a switch that the signal department hasn't checked, would you? That would be a serious violation and could get him a 30-day suspension without pay, and if you were to suggest that he do that, you wouldn't have a union card in your pocket and he would have 30 witnesses that saw you give him that directive, so you wouldn't be suggesting that, would you?" He turned 3 shades of purple, stomped back to his little white company sedan, and drove away. He held on to his asinine mid-shift shift change for another 2 weeks until he couldn't hide the massive production delays from his boss anymore, and suddenly, he wasn't in charge of the estimates anymore. The total cost of his little venture? Just over $940,000 over the course of 6 weeks. But he did manage to save $700 a night on those off hours that he didn't have to pay for. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Myself and my wife had just had our second child and moved into a duplex in an amazing neighborhood, had its own playground even. We moved in and greeted the neighbors, bunch of younger people, but they seemed okay. The first day after moving in, we find that they're gone and they're left their 7-year-old on a school day outside our door with a bag of goldfish and a note asking us to watch him while they went out. Cue CPS call #1. The neighbors and me got along really well. Old guy next door repaired bikes for a hobby, and the next door neighbor did woodworking and would always come over to see the kids and sent his grandkids over to play too. They warned us that our upstairs neighbors were trouble, constant traffic going in and out, and parties every single night. This was 110% the truth. It got to the point we couldn't sleep at night, and we had multiple altercations to the point it was full-blown yelling matches. The landlord was useless and would do nothing to get rid of them, so I bided my time. Eventually, one night they came home in their red Mazda 3 and it was destroyed. They must have hit someone and ran, so I called the RCMP to let them know, as at the very least I figured they'd get in deep crap, but oh man, I had no idea what I had just unleashed. Turns out the douchebag had a warrant out for his arrest for drug trafficking. He got hauled away in cuffs that night, and entitled woman 2 got a visit from CPS again as they left their son home alone again. This wasn't once or twice, it was every single day. So my wife went digging for names and found the mother on Facebook. Using public record searches, we found out that they owed Easy Home nearly $48K in assets as they had taken off from the original address with all of their furniture, including TVS and a huge sound system. 48 hours later, the sheriff was there with a box truck emptying their house. Took the beds, couches, TVS, the annoying subwoofer system, kitchen set, and even the dressers. CPS came shortly after and removed the child from the house. I didn't enjoy seeing him taken away, but they never fed him, and he was always in the same clothing and it was falling apart. We went out of our way to make sure he had full meals when we could not gonna let a kid starve. The douchebag went to jail for drug possession. He was out on bail and hid the drugs in a dresser they took. Entitled woman 1 went to jail for assaulting the sheriff, and entitled woman 2 actually had a happy ending. Far as I know, after she lost her son, she went through multiple programs to clean herself up and started working to provide for her son. Ran into her a couple years ago, and she thanked me for what I did. I got pro-revenge on the drug dealer and his girlfriend, and thankfully helped someone get on the right path. The next one is an entitled people story. The issues I've been having with my family have been ongoing for almost a decade, and this might be my breaking point. Close to 3 years ago, my mother moved into her new rented house. After her and my dad split, she was the occupier of the old house, but my dad's name was on the mortgage, and they decided to sell it and split what remained. Now my mom lives in a council house with my 2 siblings, 1 older sister, 1 younger sister. Even since the move, things have been tense and disastrous. My family has an issue with being clean, stemming from a pet buying obsession, reinforced laziness, and a complete disregard for personal hygiene. I often had to carry the burden of keeping most of the house clean except for people's bedrooms. I cleaned the bathroom, the kitchen, the hallways, and the living room, as well as my bedroom for as long as I still lived there. Several incidents with my mother meant I began spending less and less time there. My dad and grandparents are really accommodating. And now I'm away at university but still legally living at my mother's house. Now it's my Easter break and I decided to first stay at my dad's before then visiting my mom's. Now it is completely normal for me to just show up sometimes. Scheduling can be weird and I had my own house keys and bedroom, so it was never an issue, except this Easter. I had learnt last night, the night before I was set to show up, that my older sister had now moved into my bedroom, a bedroom which I had stayed in since moving in, and that I had paid for all the furniture and even decorating for a month, without being asked or even notified. The reason? My older sister's bedroom is a tip. She still was at university while my mother moved house, but now she is back at home. At first she was given a pop-up bed to sleep on with plans to buy her an actual one for her bedroom, provided that room was to be made for it. Her bedroom is now a nightmare, partially self-imposed, partially imposed upon her. Broken furniture, bags of rubbish, dirty clothes, and dishes everywhere. Classic nightmare scenario for me. It's a year's worth of mess without any major attempt at cleaning, to where now she can't even use her pop-up bed, although she stopped using it anyways by her own choosing. She has for the past year been in her room for the day and slept on the living room sofa at night, also in a foul and disgusting state due to pets, but it's no longer my domain, so whatever. I have repeatedly offered to help clear out her room and get it into a livable state, going so far as to offer to hire a skip so the entire household can get rid of the junk and bin bags which are genuinely piled up at this point, but she said it was fine and that it would be sorted. Now, I had before been asked whether she could temporarily inhabit my bedroom, considering I wasn't there most of the time and my room was in a much nicer condition. Under normal circumstances, I might have, but my sister doesn't shower, doesn't clean up rubbish, leaves moldy food around for weeks or even months, cannot be trusted to not damage things. I made my discomfort with her taking my bedroom very clear when asked about it, and again I have repeatedly offered to help sort out her living space so that it can be tidy and she can just have a normal space. But no, apparently that wasn't good enough, and clearly my bedroom should be given up for her sake. Now, in my eyes, this is entitled by itself, but the tipping point for me was when she replied to my messages about not even being told that she had moved into my bedroom by complaining that I hadn't informed my family ahead of time that I would be coming home for Easter. A thing I have never had to do before, nor had I ever been asked to do so before, which is only an issue because she took my bedroom without permission. The situation might be being improved, with my mother only sleeping at her house half the time anyways. She's offered up her bedroom for the weekend. But this incident has left me pretty hurt and distrustful. My space can no longer be trusted to be my space. I can't even count on being told my room was being slept in, and it's just left me pretty emotionally exhausted. Ultimately, I think it should have been my call to let her stay in my room or not, but at bare minimum should have been told about it and have been given time to sort out the rest of my stuff, should I want it removed from the room itself. It especially shouldn't be painted as me being in the wrong for daring to be annoyed that my room was taken without my permission because I didn't tell them I intended to visit with enough notice. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.